Burrow takes the snap, gives to Mixon, bouncing it wide to the left. Penalty flag down. He's at the 10, 5 into the end zone. His 5th touchdown.
How about that?
That was the Bengals radio network call on Joe Mixon's 5th touchdown from his Week 9 performance. And welcome to the Peacockies.
The first annual Peacockies. It is our award show, the most prestigious award.
I feel underdressed.
It's the most prestigious award show ever hosted in a fake bar. You know, we were trying to come up with a clever name, right? So, you know, obviously we're on Peacock, so we're thinking about the Peacockies. We thought about, is there a shorthand for it? Like, you know, because Peacockies or you know, peacock is 2 words. It's pea and cock, right? You know, when you put them together, peacock. Like, could we call them the peas? You know, that didn't feel right. And then,
no.
and then, like, all right, well, we get rid of the P. and then my producer Pete said, I have a wife, I have a family.
Yes.
Could you not get me
He
fired?
has to put food on the table.
Yeah. Could you not go there? So anyway, we're sticking with the Peacockies. Is what I did there.
Connor in the Chris Rock presenter role. Just hoping
I wanted
that
like a little envelope when I read
Blake doesn't
them.
come up and punch him in the face.
And the Peacockie goes to,
Keep Will Smith's wife's name out of your damn
no
mouth.
wife jokes on this desk. That's not from me.
For the record, before we get into the Peacockies, I think very important pressing thing. It took me literally 2 clicks on Google in terms of slalom, and this is from the this is from the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
One of my favorite
What does
dictionaries.
slalom mean in skiing? Skiing in a zigzag or wavy course between upright obstacles.
It's an event.
Skiing in a zigzag or wavy course. So when I say slalom, like, I was right.
I think it's more hips and legs.
Whatever, I'm not a skier. But my point is less about my form and more the point is I was right. Damn it. Now let's get to the Peacockies.
Right.
Not the peas.
Yes.
The Peacockies. The Peacockies.
The first category is Fantasy Game of the Year. And here are your Fantasy Game of the Year nominees. We have the infamous Stephon Diggs, Week 2 versus the Titans. 12 catches, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns. Joe Mixon, Week 9. That's what we opened this segment with against the Panthers. He's still running somewhere. 153 rushing yards, 58 receiving yards, 5. That's right, 5 touchdowns in Week 9 for Joe Mixon. Justin Fields against the Dolphins in the same week. 123 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 178 yards on the ground, and a rushing touchdown. Josh Jacobs, Week 12 at the Seahawks, 229 rushing yards, 74 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. And our final nominee, Mike Evans, in Week 17 in a must-win game against the Panthers, 10 catches, 207 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Fellas, this is a pretty even field.
Yeah, unbelievable field. A lot of great potential winners here. Honestly, you could have picked any one of these guys and gone with that and have been an absolutely, completely legitimate. Just so you know, we probably should have set this up before I derailed us with the slalom stuff. So what we did is, so Jay and I each picked our winners, but we also then went out to the fans, and we had thousands of people vote on this online, and so that'll be the actual winner is the fans' vote, because everyone knows the Peacockies are about the people, right? You know, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that about the Peacockies.
Slalom stuff.
And so for me, like, I went back and forth on this one, and for me, I felt like Fantasy Game of the Year had to be something that not only obviously won you your week, you know, a huge thing, but like, when did it come in the season? And more importantly, were you able to take advantage of it? So for me, like, and one of the concerns with Josh Jacobs and Mike Evans was that Josh Jacobs, that particular game, he'd been listed as questionable all week long, and he'd actually showed up on the injury report on Friday as questionable. It was also a late game. And so the concern was, and I know a number of people that missed out on that game because they're like, he re-injured himself on Friday, playing Seattle. It's a late game. I don't want to be stuck with, you know, trying to decide between Zamir White and Amir Abdullah. And so they benched, unfortunately, Josh Jacobs. Mike Evans had that monster game. You could say, like, hey, he did it during the fantasy playoffs, you know, amazing. But he was so brutal for the, you know, like the 6 right? You probably weren't there to enjoy it, or you may not have even started. So for me, it was Joe Mixon, who you are normally starting. It's Week 9. It's the middle of the year. You know, that's really kind of the crunch time for me. Again, you could have gone with anyone, but it's a top 10 running back game in the last 20 years, right? It's the 9th best game by a running back since the year 2000. 153, 4 touchdowns. He also 4 for 58 and a touchdown. 55.1 fantasy points. It's also the most fantasy points of anyone in any one particular game. So, because I think the most people enjoyed this game, meaning, in week 9, everyone's still alive in their playoffs. Everyone that had Joe Mixon started Joe Mixon in this game. They got 55 points from him. For me, Joe Mixon is your fantasy game of the year.
Yeah, I think, look, objectively, Joe Mixon is the right call because he literally scored more points than anyone else, so that is the fantasy game of the year. I still went with Josh Jacobs, though, because I thought that, that Carolina-Cincinnati game was terrible, and no one was watching it unless you had Joe Mixon on your fantasy team, basically. Whereas the Seattle-Vegas game, there were playoff repercussions. It was just such an absurd game, and to end it as well with an 86-yard walk-off touchdown. Jacobs won that game by himself. I was on the Seahawks in this game, and it was just absolute pain the entire time because he was so dominant. And the thing is 229 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Also had 6 catches for 74 yards. Like, he just did everything. And for a guy to have over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game where he's an underdog on the road, I thought that was the performance of the season and racked up his fantasy points.
It was an amazing performance by Josh Jacobs. Kept their playoff hopes alive. The Raiders, and again, less than 100%, kind of a Jordan flu game, if you will, by Josh Jacobs. And I will say that there are other categories that Josh Jacobs is nominated for, so we'll see how that all plays out. But who won the Peacocky? So who takes home the Peacocky?
Let's take a look at the fans' vote, and our first Peacocky Fantasy Game of the Year goes to, from the fans, Joe Mixon at a whopping 57% of the vote. The next closest, as the field kind of evened out, was Justin Fields at 15%. So Joe Mixon's 5-touchdown performance is the people fantasy game of the year.
There you go. I'm a man of the people. It makes sense that I would be the one that would, the people and I would be simpatico, and that they would be, think. We didn't really talk about Justin Fields there. That was the one thing that one of the other reasons that I voted for Mixon is
lost.
What?
He lost the game.
He lost. Not only did he lose the game, but more importantly, Joe Mixon allowed you to overcome Justin Fields, right? I mean, if you face Justin Fields, you're like, I lost. Oh, whoa, Joe Mixon. No, I did not. So there was a lot of, so that was it. But, I mean, Fields had just a monster year as well.
Our next award, Best Value Pick of the Year. The Best Value Pick nominees are, speaking of Josh Jacobs, he's at this list. His ADP was RB23. He finished as RB3 in points per game. Chris Godwin's ADP was wide receiver 34. He finished as a top 15 wide receiver. Tyler Lockett, outside the top 40 in terms of draft position, finished as a top 20 wide receiver. Tua Tagovailoa, drafted outside the top 20 quarterbacks. He finished as QB 10. And Miles Sanders, the man who said, do not draft me in fantasy, drafted as RB 33 by ADP. He finished as RB 15 in total points.
Yeah, look, again, a lot of great nominees here. With Godwin, I always felt like Godwin honestly was just a mistake by, candidly, the people that put together the Yahoo rankings. Because it was just like, we're like, guys, he's not starting we talked about him in the preseason. That the ADP on Godwin was crazy.
He played week 1.
Right. Yeah. We're like, he's not going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list, even if he misses a couple of weeks. Like, the idea that he's going as wide receiver 34 is insane. He's Chris Godwin with Tom Brady as his quarterback here. Lockett is interesting just because, again, all of us, I think collectively, the fantasy community, were down on the Seahawks offense. No one expected Geno to have the kind of year that Geno did. I thought about Miles Sanders and Tua. The concerns there was the inconsistency with both of them. With Sanders, he was a little too touchdown dependent. Now, he finally scored touchdowns this year. The last couple of years he really hasn't. But there was a little bit of inconsistency to Sanders, obviously with Tua with the injuries in and out of the lineup here. So for me, I went with Josh Jacobs, right? I mean, Josh Jacobs not only went as running back 23, but most people felt like that was too high. And I was one of them. Josh Jacobs was by far my biggest miss of the season. And the reason I swung and missed on him is because I was just like, you know why I don't like him? The Raiders don't like him. Yeah. Like, they declined his 5th-year option. This is a guy they used a first-round NFL draft pick on, and they declined his 5th-year option. New regime in Las Vegas with that organization. Josh McDaniels has always used multiple running backs throughout his career. You saw in the preseason game, the Hall of Fame game where they used him on the first 2 series. There's Derek Carr and Devontae Adams and Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow in street clothes. Like, they ain't playing. We ain't risking them in the first preseason. But here's Josh Jacobs getting 8 carries in the first 10 minutes. And you're like, okay, they do not care about this guy. And Josh Jacobs, by, force of nature, just had, amazing. And the other thing was, he finishes, he finishes as the 3rd best running back in fantasy, consistent week in, week out. He just produced at a high level, massive volume, 20 touches this year in 12 different games, over 1,600 rushing yards, had, a lot of pass catching involvement too, Jay. To me, he's by clear the best value pick.
Yeah, has to be. Yeah. Has to be Josh Jacobs. I think that the thing is that he was drafted after A.J. Dillon and David Montgomery. And for him to do what he did, won the rushing title, I'm still not sure he's thought of in the same breath as like Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. He's that good. He might even be better than those guys. The talent that he has is absurd. Nick Bosa called him the best running back he's ever faced. And I still don't think America is perhaps entirely across the Josh Jacobs experience, maybe because no one got to see the 86-yard touchdown against Seattle on television because every network broke away from it on the East Coast. So he is amazing, and he is the winner here.
And it is. It's one of those weird things. So he plays on a quote-unquote bad team, the Raiders. They were alive in the playoffs for a while, but, they were in the lower part of that division, obviously. And there's nothing, like, he doesn't have a fun name like Christian McCaffrey, or, like, there's no nickname
King
for him.
Henry.
I know it sounds dumb, but, like, because Josh Jacobs is sort of like just kind of a solid name, like
2 first names too.
Two
Not
first
trustworthy.
names. 2 first names for me is always a crowd pleaser, but the fact is right. But yes, maybe not trustworthy. But Josh Jacobs just feels like a middle manager in accounting. Like he's just like he's like whatever the senior assistant director of HR. I got to go see Mr. Jacobs. I don't know. He just doesn't have the national profile. I think that it seems the dumbest thing in the world, but if he had a more fun name, Dalvin Cook, that's a good name. Like, I don't know.
Well, guys, safe to say,
but the fans, who do the fans vote for the Peacocky?
A runaway here from the fans. The Peacocky goes to Josh Jacobs, best value pick of the 2022 fantasy season. He takes home 86% of the vote. Miles Sanders, Tyler Lockett, both 4%. Tua and Godwin at 3%. So this was a runaway for Josh Jacobs. But
much like he did against Seattle.
Yes, it's a wild year for Josh Jacobs, who will do quite well, I think, in free agency if he avoids the franchise tag. Let's get to our next award here. Best waiver wire pickup of the season right here. As you see the nominees, let's start with Justin Fields, who finished as QB5 on the season. Evan Ingram, who finished as tight end 7. Jamal Williams finished as a top 20 running back. Tyler Algier had almost 1,200 scrimmage yards after being a day 3 pick. Pretty good for the rookie for the Falcons. And Jerick McKinnon, RB2 in points per game over the final pivotal 6 weeks of the season. Barry, out of this list, is there a runaway like Jacobs was on the last one, or is this field a little tighter?
I think the field's a little tighter, but I think there's a clear winner here. At least there was for me. I mean, McKinnon was amazing, especially down the stretch. Like, he won a lot of people their fantasy titles. Evan Ingram, in a year in which tight end is just sort of like absolutely a wasteland, Ingram had a great year as a top 7 guy. I mean, Jamal Williams and Algier, again, running back, kind of a wasteland as well, and both guys provided lots of value, although with Williams, again, so touchdown dependent, and, felt like he was better at the beginning of the year than he was towards the end. Algier, better towards the end of the year. And you never fully trusted it just because Atlanta's such a low-volume offense. So for me, I feel like it's Justin Fields. This was a bad year for quarterbacks in general. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, some of the big-name veteran guys that were drafted inside the top 12 didn't have those kind of years. Kyler Murray gets hurt. Lamar Jackson misses time. It was a very inconsistent year for big-name fantasy quarterbacks, and yet, and obviously Russell Wilson just completely, the bottom fell out on him, and yet Justin Fields just exploded. In the last 9 games he played, guys, he had over 20 fantasy points in 6 of them. You think about those weeks 9 through 10, where he had back-to-back games with over 39 fantasy points. 7 different games with 80 or more rushing yards. We always talk about the importance of rushing for a quarterback. So for me, because of because of actually how bad the quarterback position was, I got to go with Justin Fields.
Has to be Fields. You're not supposed to be able to find top 5 quarterbacks on the waiver wire, so it has to be Fields.
Yeah, he probably bailed a lot of people out that missed early on a quarterback and probably saved their season. Let's look at what the fans thought of this one, and no surprise here, Fields takes home the Peacocky for the best waiver wire pickup with 52% of the vote. A bit of a runaway here. McKinnon did get 25% of the votes. I guarantee 22% of those voters, he probably won them their season down the stretch, McKinnon.
Second half of the year, he had 8 receiving touchdowns, the most by any running back. 5 more than Samaje Perine or Tony Pollard, who were second place with 3. 8 receiving touchdowns from week 9 on for Jerick McKinnon. He won a bunch of people their titles, including me. Just want to put that out there that I won a bunch of leagues with Jerick McKinnon. Thank you very much. No big deal, NBD. I just want to say that. But yeah, Justin Fields, congratulations.
Your first Peacocky.
Let's see. So yeah, anyway, congratulations to Justin Fields winning a Peacocky. The Bears get the #1 pick and have a Peacocky winner.
Pretty good.
Things are looking up in Chicago.
Our next award is the Fantasy Rookie of the Year, and here are the nominees, starting with Kenneth Walker, who finished his RB16 this year. Cris Olave, wide receiver 26, finished for him. Garrett Wilson not far behind, wide receiver 30. Shout out to Olave and Garrett Wilson for persevering, considering their quarterback situations. Dameon Pierce missed the end of the season, still finished as RB20. And Christian Watson, who got hot in the second half of the year, finishes as wide receiver 32. Jay, you look at this board right here, there's obviously a pretty big disparity in the guy at the top on the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be Ken Walker. Feels like a kind of Shakespeare in Love Best Picture winner. Not your best ever, not your Casablanca types, but I do think the Ken Walker, just with the 9 touchdowns to go with the 1K yards. I mean, he didn't have a touchdown in his last 5 games. He kind of cooled off, but he did enough in that middle stretch of the season. The winner should have been Breece Hall, but he gets hurt, so Ken Walker.
Yeah, nice bone you throw there to our Jets guy here. It's interesting, and that's the cooled off is the key phrase there, because as you look through all these, Cris Olave started hot, cooled off. Dameon Pierce started hot, cooled off. Christian Watson started cold, got hot, cooled off. And
Garrett
so
Wilson was like the
Garrett
roller
Wilson,
coaster.
right? I mean, it was just like, okay, who's playing quarterback this week? We're in on Garrett Wilson. Oh, no, it's a Zach Wilson. No. Yeah, so it just like inconsistency with all these rookies, which isn't surprising. That's why they're rookies here. So I think just because, given the wasteland that is running back and the touchdowns, Ken Walker III, KW3 is my choice as well. But who got the Peacocky?
Well, and the fan vote goes to,
as we see Ken Walker just
running over,
just rolling over Raiders.
That's
the best run.
The fan vote goes to KW3. Kenneth Walker, 77% of the vote. A huge runaway here. The next closest was Cris Olave at 10%. Throw you a quick one here, guys.
And I will say that I think that had the Saints been better, had Dalton been better, Olave might win this award. But I think just, he really sunk that offense.
Counting Breece Hall in this group, who gets drafted first in fantasy next year, Barry? Pretty tough, right?
It is pretty tough. I'm going to still say Ken Walker for me, just because you don't have the injury concerns with Breece Hall. You feel better about that offense with Geno, assuming Geno Smith is back with the Seahawks, and we expect that to happen. You feel better about that offense. Rashad Penny was on a 1-year deal, so we'll see if they bring him back, but this is clearly Ken Walker's backfield. Breece Hall coming off the ACL. They still have Michael Carter there. They're going to still have Bam Knight. Obviously, it'll be Breece Hall's backfield when he starts, but you're just not going to know. Is he going to be fully healthy and have that explosiveness, at least to start the season? So I think Ken Walker gets drafted first. But future is bright, obviously, for Breece Hall. And had he stayed healthy the whole season, he probably wins this award. I agree with you, Jay.
Our next award, Breakout Player of the Year. This is a great field here, guys, and I think one of our more even ones. Tony Pollard, drafted as RB34 by ADP, finished as RB8 in points per game, a top 10 running back finish for Tony Pollard. Ramondre Stevenson, Barry, you loved him over the summer, and you reaped those rewards here. Drafted as RB32, finished as RB10. Devontae Smith, ADP of wide receiver 40, finished as wide receiver 14 in points per game. Christian Kirk, that signing was great for Jacksonville, drafted as wide receiver 38, finished as a top 20 wide receiver, as you see on the screen. Daniel Jones, drafted as QB 29. He has a top 10 QB finish, QB 8. So your ride or die from years ago, Daniel Jones, it finally comes to fruition.
Just listen. I'm a genius. It's not it's not my job to tell you when to listen to me. I just spew the knowledge, and then you guys have to figure out when it's. Look, I was just early. What can I help it that I can just see into the future that far ahead? Normally, I'm able to control my powers and Jalen Hurts this year, Austin Eckler last year, but I was just too early on Daniel Jones. So screw all you naysayers. He had an awesome year. Finishes his QB8 in points per game. Has his Giants heading to the divisional round. Right here are the only guys that had 20 or more fantasy points in 5 games this season. Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Daniel freaking Dimes. How about them apples? Look, I think, Christian Kirk got the big contract, had a chance to be, number one in Jacksonville, finished as a top 20 wide receiver in points per game despite an ADP of wide receiver 38. Wide receiver 38 finishes wide receiver 18. Devontae Smith. Everyone's like, oh, this is going to be a run-heavy and A.J. Brown show. ADP of wide receiver 40. Wide receiver 14. I loved me some Ramondre. Kept talking about this is going to be Ramondre Stevens' season, and I so wanted to vote for him. But the answer's got to be Tony Pollard. Even in a year in which Zeke basically stayed healthy, he only missed 2 games. The fact of the matter is that Tony Pollard established himself not only as the number one running back in that Cowboys offense, but as a number one running back in fantasy.
Okay, you going with Pollard as well?
No, I'm going with Dimes. I think Dimes was just more surprising.
Just the B-roll for you.
Yeah, I think we all saw the path for Pollard if he got more usage. Daniel Jones was extremely turnover prone. They declined his 5th-year option. Now he looks like an above-average quarterback who's the least turnover prone quarterback in the league. The rushing volume is insane, so I'm going Dimes.
My only pushback on that is I would argue that people didn't see that. The counter argument to Tony Pollard were 2 things. Number one, obviously Ezekiel Elliott, but also can this guy withstand? He's too much of a scat back. He's too much. By the way, which is ridiculous because he's 6'2". He's not. Because he's so fast. No, because he's so fast. I think people, and because he's built so differently than Ezekiel Elliott, that people just assume he's a quote unquote prototypical pass-catching running back. But no, he's not. He's a bigger guy who ran between the tackles in college.
Absolutely.
He can handle a full workload, but I think the general narrative on him that he couldn't handle a full workload, and this year he proved he could.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at who the fans decided on for Breakout Player of the Year, and the Peacocky goes to Tony Pollard in a closer one. 47% of the vote goes to Pollard. Ramondre Stevenson actually comes in second.
I really wanted to vote for him too, but Tony Pollard can't be denied. He's earned a Peacocky, exactly. The Peacocky absolutely goes to him. When you look at the photo of Tony Pollard, you're like, that's a Peacocky winner. That's the kind of guy. That's the kind of guy that deserves a Peacocky.
I'll tell you what you didn't win. The hearts of America, the hearts of Falcons fans, the hearts of Kyle Pitts' mom. I'll tell you didn't win any of that. All you won was 2 losses. That's right. And I don't even know if that makes sense. You won losses because that's all you've got to show for yourself, Arthur Smith. Free Kyle Pitts.
And he go off in week 3. We just going to say, woo!
Cockies. And you know what that video means. Time for biggest bust of the season.
Right. Are you saying that video is the biggest bust? Because that would be a fair criticism.
No, there was a glimmer of hope after that video.
Well, here's the thing. Lawrence is funny. Lawrence can get away with that. I just look like an old man there. In fairness, I always look like an old man because you know what? I am, in fact, an old man.
Biggest bust nominees. We start with Jonathan Taylor, drafted obviously as RB1. He finished as RB17. Najee Harris, drafted as RB6 with ADP, finished as RB19, just snuck in the top 20 at the end of the season. Kyle Pitts, drafted with an ADP of tight end 3, finishes as tight end 22 in an awful year for the tight end position. Allen Robinson, drafted as a top 20 receiver, finished outside the top 50. And Russell Wilson, drafted as a top 10 quarterback and finished as QB 18. Plenty of great selections here for you guys. Jay, are you going with the obvious? Who is the worst?
Well, people are going to say Jonathan Taylor, and I don't agree with that because I think that was a health thing. When he was healthy, he was fine. He played some games banged up. It has to be Kyle Pitts. People were making the case for Kyle Pitts as probably the same group as Kelsey and Andrews. Sure. And to be tight end 22 when he was healthy, it's a disaster. So he's the winner for me.
Yeah, look, you're just talking through some of these other guys, right? Jonathan Taylor, again, I'm with you. Had you grabbed Deion Jackson, you could have gotten production. Running back 17 obviously is not ideal, but it's also usable.
Yes.
Right? Again, disappointing and not what you want out of the number one player overall, but it's usable. It doesn't absolutely kill you. Allen Robinson killed you. I mean, like a lot of people came out of the draft with him as their number 2 wide receiver, his ADP of wide receiver 18. He was a top 20 guy. He finished as wide receiver 56, and candidly, I'm surprised it's that high. He was just absolutely brutal. Think about Russell Wilson. Again, quarterback's supposed to be this deep position, right? Top 10 quarterback drafted ADP of QB9, QB 18, and like a bad 18, right? He was just absolutely lost you weeks. Najee Harris, same thing. Drafted as a top 10, but he was usable down the stretch. He was okay. Kyle Pitts is the clear answer because, first off, there's a strategy thing when you go into a draft. Am I taking a tight end high or not? And if you take a tight end high, you are giving up a running back or a wide receiver, so you need elite production from that tight end to take him high. It's why the Kelce argument in the first 2 rounds is always there. And so not only did he have a 3rd round ADP overall, and not only he didn't give you elite production at the tight end, also the opportunity cost of who you could have drafted for him, as you see it there, 42% of America votes for him for the Peacocky. This should have been 100%. He's the biggest bust. Under 30 receiving yards in 7 of 10 games, under 5 fantasy points in 6 of 10 games. It wasn't that he was semi-usable or a disappointment. He killed you. He killed you.
You are currently seeing the fan vote for the fantasy MVP of the season, and who takes it home but Travis Kelce, beating out Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Hurts, and Tyreek Hill. Just an incredible year in what was a wasteland for the tight end position. Kelce takes this one home, guys.
I voted for Eckler because he's my ride or die, and he was so good in the playoffs. But Travis Kelce had, he was so much better than he's 100 points better than tight end 2. So not only was he elite, but he was elite at a position where no one else was. So Kelce, I understand why the fans voted for him. He's an easy pick.
Yep, close, controversial vote. Shades of Crash over Brokeback Mountain, but I'm going with Kelce as well. I just think relative to position, he was the guy.
Yeah.
And our last Peacocky, the Fantasy Playoffs MVP. If this guy won you a league, yo, him a big thank you. And I do want to start with the fans, guys, right here. The nominees were Patrick Mahomes in the fantasy playoffs, averaging 27.3 points per game. CeeDee Lamb, 24.9 points. Christian McCaffrey, 23.6. George Kittle, after a solid year, explodes in the fantasy playoffs. And then Cam Akers, averaging over 20 points.
McCaffrey gets the win here. I voted for Kittle just because, again, the tight end position. He had 5 touchdowns during the fantasy playoffs. But, look, CMC averaged 24.3 fantasy points per game over the fantasy playoffs. 7 total touchdowns in his final 6 weeks of the season. He's very worthy of a Peacocky. We're being played off the stage, guys. Love you all. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.